backing me into it. Goddamn. Driver in the... Do not... Ow! Oh, get out of here! Make it, make it!
Good morning to you, too.
Hey, babe. You know, I've been thinking about moving to you, boss.
Yeah, sure, but...
I'm gonna send for you.
Parish, which was directed by Sunu Gernra, tells the tale of Garcian Gray Parish, a former gangster who chose to build a respectable company after retiring. Garcian was a skilled con guy who was renowned for disappearing from sight. Garcian had taken the resolution that he would never again engage in criminal activity, but his commitments forced him to reconsider. He was aware that he had to look for opportunities to turn a profit. Because his business was going well, he couldn't control his urges and decided to take on one final assignment when Colin approached him with an offer. Now let's see what transpired with Garcian and whether Colin and him were able to complete the task effectively. When the police car approached Garcian's red Porsche Macan from behind and ordered him to halt, we witnessed it at the opening of Parish Episode 1. Garcian drove as if his life depended on it because he knew that if they searched his car, the game would be over. Things that were occurring in Garcia's head provided us with insight into his sensibility and views. Garcian felt that he had to take control of his life since he had let himself become a passenger in it. Something was unsettling him, a sensation that everything were crumbling. He was emotionally and financially unstable, and not a single thing was going his way. He was desperate too, which was why he had agreed to execute that fraudulent job. Although he had long since retired from that life, he returned because he was aware of his obligations. People admired Garcian because, despite his criminal past, he was a man of character. The first episode of Parish transports us back a few days to when Colin requested Garcian for assistance with a project. Although, as previously said, Garcian had given up that life, he was extremely skilled at what he did. He aspired to be the best version of himself and to put his family first. Colin informed Garcian that he had been instructed to break into a facility and deliver a parcel by Shepard, also known as the Horse, an international mobster. Now, Colin used to work for the Horse, and during his previous employment, he made a mistake. He was aware that he had to make up for his error by making this delivery. He was aware that the Horse was a deadly guy and that he would perish if he failed to complete his task. Colin asked Garcian for one more time's assistance, but he had already made up his decision and informed him he didn't want to go into the swamp. Although Garcian did not agree at the time, he eventually changed his mind after learning certain facts. Garcian's company was struggling and they were in danger of filing for bankruptcy. Garcian's wife, Rose, suggested that they move to a less affluent area and alter their address. Rose was aware that their income was limited and that they wouldn't be able to support themselves if things continued in that manner. Garcian, however, was determined to remain in the same home. Since his family had grown their children there and had many happy memories there as well as experienced many heartbreaking moments together, Garcian felt confident he would be able to move residences. Garcian's kid had experienced something in the past, and the anguish and sorrow in his eyes indicated that his death was not due to natural causes. Michaela, the Garcian's daughter, however, had other problems with her father. He seemed to be unsupportive of her at all times. At the dinner table, she confided in him that she had always wanted to learn to drive but that, up until that point, Garcian had not made the effort to support her in doing so. If Maddox had been involved, she claimed, he would have instructed him. Garcian, who cherished his daughter, came to the realization that he had to act now, before it was too late. Garcian let her daughter to drive his automobile for the first time after going and accepting Colin's offer. Garcian initially had the pleasure of meeting the Horse and his brother, Zenzo Tongai. Horse saw that Garcian was a rather competent individual and a guy of honesty. Garcian sensed the tension in the air and knew he wouldn't benefit from any sort of relationship with the horse. But he was desperate then. The only thing that mattered was that he needed the money. In order to get them into his office and access his safe, Garcian was requested to get a lawyer by the name of Peter. Garcian was downstairs waiting for Peter and Colin as they entered the building. In an attempt to appear astute, Peter informed Colin that his partners had altered the combination for the safe lock. He most likely alerted one of his partners to his peril by calling him. The cops arrived and surrounded the building even though Colin was able to get the gift once the safe unlocked. Garcian destroyed his automobile and stole the identical red Porsche Macan that he was shown driving at the start of Parish Episode 1 after realizing he would need to make some adjustments. Peter was brought along by Garcian and Colin, who then gave the horse the gift. Zenzo and the horse were not pleased that the anticipated peaceful work turned into such a disaster. After Zenzo murdered Peter, he and Horse fled the scene. Horse likely didn't hurt Garcian because he loved the man, but it's also conceivable that the latter understood he might use Garcian in the future. Garcian knew then that accepting Colin's offer was not the greatest course of action, but there was no turning back. We would find out where Garcian's life goes in the upcoming Parish episodes, as well as if he is able to resolve the issue in both his personal and professional lives.
I'm supposed to pick up a package from my boss.
Condolences for your loss.
My job is to get your money. I'll take care of it.
Wait. Move. Sir, you gotta stay.
Let him through.
We miss one thing.
What was the plan, Zenzo?
Which is exactly why you're not or against me.
Parish's second episode, Blood in the Water, begins with Gray experiencing flashbacks to his dark past as he discovers that he and Colin are the only people left at his workplace with a body. As seen in Parish Episode 1, Grayshan decided to assist his buddy Colin because he wanted the latter to escape the predicament he was in as well as to obtain some fast cash to improve his family's financial circumstances. Grayshan was unaware that it was a marsh from which he would never be able to escape. Upon seeing a lawyer's death, Grayshan came to the realization that he had made a mistake. Now let's see what transpired in Parish Episode 2 and whether Grayshan succeeded in overcoming all obstacles and emerging unsullied from the ordeal. Colin is informed by Gray that they must dispose of the body carefully to avoid leaving any trace evidence that might lead to their conviction. Zed, the spouse of Gray's partner, arrives and seems suspicious that something is wrong while the two of them are cleaning the property, but Gray is able to divert attention. Zenzo, however, and the horse get into a small argument about Zenzo's little trick of killing the lawyer in Gray's office. He is reminded by the horse that they are here to work, not to get into situations like this. The slightly deranged Zenzo tells him that he is not acting in a way that the barber would approve of. After cleaning up, Colin and Gray head out in the car to figure out how to dispose of the body. At this point, Colin informs Gray that the Zimbabwean criminals are actually involved in human trafficking. However, before they can proceed any farther, Colin gets a call from his parole officer requesting that he come see him immediately. After dropping Colin off, Gray drives his car back to his house and places the body in his garage to go into deep freeze. Colin realized at that moment that his parole officials were scheduled to see him that day. Grayshan stated he had to go meet the cops just as Colin and him were about to dispose of the corpse. Grayshan was furious with him for his uncontrollable nature. Grayshan left Colin at his house and returned to his own. When two investigators arrive at Gray's house, he waves them off, telling them that he has no knowledge of Colin or the robbery that happened. Grayshan was aware that his life would be ruined if he left any trace. He was sorry to have agreed to aid Colin, but he had to find a method to rescue himself because the ship had sailed. He destroyed the clothing they were both wearing and thoroughly cleaned the garage. It was evident from Grayshan's handling of the matter that he had encountered similar predicaments in the past. Although he was irritated with Colin, he realized that he had to first hide his trail and ensure that the authorities would not uncover any evidence that would implicate them. Greyshan's old acquaintance arrived at the garage to investigate after hearing a lot of noises emanating from there. Greyshan handled things expertly, keeping the woman unaware that a dead person was laying there. Later on in Parish Episode 2, we witnessed Colin and Greyshan driving to the city's outside and disposing of the lawyer's body in a lake. Greyshan said a lot to Colin in the heat of the situation when his car became trapped there. After a nasty quarrel, they both recognized it was their fault and made up. Subsequently, Ducey and Fuentes, two investigators, visited Greyshan's home and inquired about Colin. They informed him that he was the main suspect in the theft case involving the break-in at a lawyer's office. Greyshan made it quite evident that he was unrelated to the event, even though he was aware that the police had learned of what they had done. He said that it had been a while since he had seen Colin and that he had no idea where the man was. Although the detectives were skeptical of Greyshan's claim, they were unable to address it in the absence of any supporting documentation. However, Greyshan learned from the encounter that he was treading carefully and would need to take more caution going forward. Zenzo killed the lawyer in the previous Parish episode, and while it appeared to be a prearranged maneuver, it wasn't. Zenzo broke limits and operated on his own initiative, which infuriated Horse. They had agreed to only frighten and caution the individual rather than really killing him. But Zenzo became so furious that he murdered the man and made a terrible mess. Episode 2 revealed that the brothers were frequently at odds with one another. Zenzo's behavior did not sit well with Horse, who informed him that he had to follow instructions. It was obvious from Horse's demeanor that Zenzo reported to him. Zenzo's pride was bruised, but he held his tongue for the time being. Since hostility had been sowed that day, I think Zenzo would turn against his sibling in the future. Later on, Zenzo was spotted interacting with Horse's kid Luke, and the latter had an odd expression in his eye. Zenzo had the impression that he was planning ahead and had already chosen his course of action. Greyshan visited Horse's home at the conclusion of Parish Episode 2 to inform him that the body had been disposed of. After they finish disposing of the body, the Horse sits down with Grey, who is still mourning for his son, despite being advised not to do business with him. Although Grey had earlier said that he would only be working for Colin on this one project since it was what Colin wanted, the Horse insists that Grey stay. Horse thought that maybe in the future, when he needed my help, Greyshan would come to me since he was a truly kind man. Horse wanted to make apologies and let Greyshan know that he truly admired him for who he was because their first encounter hadn't gone as planned. Horse requested that Greyshan work for him, but it became evident very quickly that Horse wanted to be with his family and earn a salary through proper channels. However, Horse wouldn't give up and begged Greyshan to take him there in a car. Before he persuaded Greyshan to work for him, Horse made up his mind that he would not give up. Greyshan saw a dark automobile was after him when he was driving Horse and his son. He began speeding after realizing that their lives were in jeopardy. After a group of guys opened fire on him, Greyshan was able to capture Luke and hide him. Just as he was ready to return and assist Horse, the latter was shot. It was shown in the post-credit sequence that Horse was alive and that Greyshan had taken him to his friend's house so that he could receive medical care. I think Greyshan will become Horse's right-hand guy if he lives. Horse witnessed Greyshan put his own life at danger to save his son. Horse was the type of man who was appreciative of the reliable individuals in his life. Greyshan's life was about to change, and his financial issues would undoubtedly be resolved, in my opinion. These tribes that attacked the Horse now feel, for the most part, like white people. Therefore, it stands to reason that the businessman the Horse had earlier attempted to frighten, or whose employees were impacted by the Horse taking the passports, was the one who gave the order to kill. Zenzo, the elder brother of the Horses, may, however, also be involved. He may have created the impression that he wasn't because he was envious that his younger brother was given the position of leader rather than him.
You been thinking about the old days?
I changed to a robbery that happened yesterday at a law firm.
Get down! Cover the boy!
There's tombs over there.
That's NOPD, we gotta go!
Okay, look.
Wait, you changed the rule!
No. I saved your boy. Did you remember?
Let it go, man. Cops are almost here. We don't stop.
Back, please. Okay.
That was even grosser.
Pretty sure Dad figured out the money.
I saw him sneaking away.
Horse and Grayshan reconnected in the previous Parish episode, with Horse asking Grayshan to work for the Tongai family. Those who knew Grayshan well thought highly of him. He was an honest man. Horse was determined to change Grayshan's opinion, and he wanted others like Grayshan around him. Grayshan was likewise going through a very trying time. He was considering selling his property and moving to a more inexpensive area because his garage wasn't turning a profit and things had become so terrible. Grayshan recognized that this was the most sensible course of action, even if he didn't want to, because the house had many special memories for him. So let's review Parish's third episode to see if Grayshan was successful in saving Horse's life. In the previous Parish episode, we witnessed a couple armed guys behind Horse's vehicle before they abruptly opened fire on him. Luke, Horse's kid, and Grayshan were able to escape together. After making sure Luke was secure, Grayshan returned to assist Horse. The whole affair revealed much about the character of Grayshan. Grayshan had no desire to work for Horse, but he returned to assist Colin only because he needed to pay off his obligation. Horse came to the realization that he required someone such as Grayshan in his vicinity. Horse spoke with Grayshan one-on-one after Colin's employment ended and attempted to persuade him to work for him. It cannot be disputed that Grayshan was in a bind and that, for a split second, he considered doing business with Horse, knowing that this man would take care of all his financial issues.
You know, I learned. Close my eyes.
We used to pray together every night.
Be thy name. Was a trespass against us. And the glory.
I see it.
Whatever. Give me your hand.
You and Gray.
Drag his ass all over every street in the town.
No, never thought he was bad.
Bubs.
What? History.
So after the shooting event, Grayshan demonstrated his usefulness once more, and I think Horse would make him a permanent part of his group. I think this would be a bad idea because Zenzo, Horse's brother, didn't enjoy the attention that Grayshan received. Even when Horse requested Grayshan to take him to his goal, Zenzo still felt quite uneasy. Zenzo was an unreasonable man who occasionally got Horse into problems. We saw that he killed the lawyer in the previous Parish episode, even though the only goal was to frighten him into giving over all the information. Zenzo and Shamiso became concerned when Horse vanished. Shamiso arrived at Lusto's residence because she had cause to suspect that he was involved in her brother's disappearance. Lusto verified that Horse had been shot by Anton's men. Horse's greatest adversary was Anton. In fact, Grayshan used to work for him. Luckily, Anton's men had to retreat and flee as the NOPD helicopter began to hover over them. Grayshan sprang in Horse's direction and lifted him. Horse had lost a lot of blood when a gunshot went through his body. Grayshan realized he would need to take him to a reliable person. At one time in his life, Grayshan was quite close to Anne, and he knew that she would not refuse his requests for assistance. Grayshan, Luke, and Horse arrived at Anne's apartment, and after a brief moment of hesitation, she noticed the expression on the small boy's face and accepted him all in. Anne did not want anything to do with such people or such work, thus she was furious at Grayshan. Like Grayshan, she was aware of the ramifications of her past deeds, and the two of them truly decided to make a positive change. However, Grayshan had battled for her independence and ensured that her poisonous and violent ex-partner left her, so Anne realized she owed him a great deal. After Anne sutured the incision, Horse's life was preserved. Grayshan saw that a guy had entered the property after Horse had assumed he could return to his home. That man was employed by Anton, and it was his responsibility to complete the task assigned to him. The fact that Anton's men were unable to kill Horse infuriated him, and he vowed to hold them accountable for their botched effort. Anne was requested to take this man inside after he brandished a pistol on her. After defeating the guy, Grayshan and Anne bound him and brought him to Horse's house. Grayshan was informed by Anne that she would never want to see his face again. Anne did not make a mistake. She took them in because she knew Grayshan needed assistance, but she also knew that if she made even one mistake, everything she had worked so hard to build would fall apart. She didn't want to ruin anything because starting over again required a lot of work. When Grayshan returned home at the conclusion of Parish episode 3, he saw Anton was already seated. Things for Grayshan and his family didn't seem good at all as the episode concluded on a cliffhanger. We learned in the mid-credit sequences that Anton had advised Grayshan to murder Horse in order to preserve his family. Grayshan would have to accept Anton's words now, without a doubt. Grayshan had dug his own grave because he had no other option. He understood that life should have stayed that way since he had left it a long time ago. I think that Grayshan will now consent to work for Horse and find a way out of this predicament. Everything was on the line, and Grayshan would have to proceed extremely carefully at every turn. It seems that his family didn't know much about his background, so Grayshan would also need to explain things to them. It would be intriguing to observe how Grayshan responds to the circumstance and whether he is successful in saving his family.
Not until I find out who's behind
Got company. Someone helped them track.
In a long time.
Senator Clinton hold a 5-point lead.
One to base. Me.
Another day, another. Checks out, boss. Want me to call him?
Mr. Good.
You know what I asked him? So this is what they dip the toes back in. Thing is, someone who has a future.
With all due respect.
What are you saying, Brad?
More than the cops know about you.
This is a big job.
You know what I told them?
You were testing the water.
Dad.
Whatever you think is going
back for their sake. Registered the Parish taxiing jet. Yeah. I got a Malamute. You know, there's agony. Problem solved. Developed a taste for blood. You really need me to spell it out? Put him to work. One day, he used to get close to him.
You gotta give us something.
before I met your mother.
Greg, see back these men into a corner.
This how you do me?
Lovely home, Mrs. Parish. Got a guy there who can get you what you need.
I'll go.
In the previous Parish episode, we seen how Grayshan risked his life to defend Horse, without even realizing that the guys who came to murder Horse were members of Anton's gang. Given that Horse had made the decision to live a hassle-free life, Anton was similarly startled to hear that Grayshan had saved his life. Let's see what Anton does and whether he truly chooses to murder Horse in order to protect his family. During a flashback, we learned that 7 years prior, Grayshan had made the decision to choose his family above joining the underworld. Grayshan wished to maintain the privacy of his past actions from his wife and kids. Grayson had no idea that life would compel him to make a decision for his family's protection when it came to a crossroads once more. In the earlier episodes, we witnessed an attack by Anton's men on Horse, and Grayshan was unaware that the two men were acquainted. Essentially, Horse used to work for Anton, and over time, the latter came to believe that Horse was betraying him in order to replace him and get the same level of control that he did. At this point, Anton had issued his soldiers with explicit orders, stating that he desired Horse's death at whatever price. However, Grayshan arrived as a surprise, shocking even Anton, who had earlier vowed to stay out of the company. When Anton got to Grayshan's house, he informed him that if he wanted to ensure his family's survival, he would have to murder Horse on his behalf. Grayshan went to Horse's residence in Parish episode 4 because he was left with no other choice. Although I don't believe Grayshan would have murdered Horse, he was unsure of how to handle the issue at hand. Grayshan had had enough of everything and was in a pickle. Grayshan decided that he would find a permanent solution to the problem since he didn't want his family to suffer the consequences of his previous life. Grayshan had no intentions at all and was in free fall for the first time. he had resolved to ensure his family's safety and well-being while being prepared to adapt when necessary. When Grayshan drove Horse, he had no idea that Zenzo and Horse had previously discovered that a tracker had been installed on Horse's vehicle. Zenzo attempted to convince his brother that he was putting his confidence in a traitor, as it was evident that Grease's loyalty was called into doubt. Horse was obviously respectful of Grayshan, and he also understood that he would not have survived the gunshot if he had been present on the day of it. Horse's son Luke adored Grayshan, and even Horse could see the elderly man's fondness for the young lad. Horse believed that Zenzo was insulting Grayshan and repeatedly interrupted him during the talk in an effort to treat the elder with more respect. However, the truth was that a tracker had been discovered, and even Horse was curious about its identity. Zenzo had been questioning and torturing the man from Anton's group, who had been taken prisoner by Grayshan. He said to Zenzo that Colin was betraying everyone and that he had been giving him lies for a very long time. Zenzo wanted to know the truth, so he instructed Grayshan to phone Colin. Zenzo was not in the mood to hear Grayshan tell them that they could trust the guy on the enemy's side. Grayshan called Colin and asked him to come over to Horse's estate. Colin refuted any involvement he may have had with Anton. When Zenzo lost his rage and nearly murdered Colin with his machete, things were a little heated. Horse stepped in at that point because he wanted to handle things and find a better solution. Zenzo was clearly a highly jealous man who became envious when his brother treated him with the same respect that he did Grayshan. Zenzo was not happy when Horse requested Grayshan to drive him, but he was unable to stop his brother's request. Time and again, Grayshan told Shamiso and even Zenzo that he was happy enough not to have to deal with the Tongai family and that he had no intention of replacing them. Horse knew the dynamics and would occasionally step in and beg his irascible brother to cool off. Horse believed he could handle Colin, Grayshan, and him better if Zenzo and the others left him and the others alone at the conclusion of Parish Episode 4. Grayshan confronted Colin, in front of Horse, why he had abused his confidence while acting furious. Colin went along with it as well, telling Grayshan not to pressure him into saying something that would undermine everyone's efforts. Grayshan informed Horse that he was tired of people attempting to ruin the life he had built for himself and that he was going to murder Colin with his own hands. Grayshan picked up the machete, and then abruptly he turned to face Horse, putting the blade around his throat. Grayshan informed his Horse he was done being the passenger in his own life, without injuring him. He informed him that he would not cede control of his life to anybody and that he would have to resolve his differences with Anton on his own. Rose, meantime, murdered Anton's men at Grayshan's house before going to hide with Michaela. When Grayshan returned to his home, the manner he handled the matter caused Horse to consider several things. In the epilogue of Parish Episode 4, Horse confronted Anton, telling him to cease circling and take immediate action if he wanted to kill him. Even for Anton, it was an unexpected move, and I think it would significantly alter the course of events going forward. We would find out in later episodes whether Grayshan is able to move on from the ghost of his past and resume his regular life, as well as whether the friendship between Horse and Anton gets better.
What's over there with the old you?
They want me to kill Horse.
You wanted my head.
What else would we do?
Mac, believe me, I know.
There's no sense putting it off.
No, hold on. Rose! Rose! We spent 3 years in a courtroom, you and Mac on, with the kind of reach he has.
Here. You're both.
I had to ask Howard.
Howard took what was mine. I think they own my people. You laughed in my face, shall we?
And that's safe that you have no claim to. Why don't we... Let's... Shit's expensive, man.
Yeah, put it down.
Mrs. Parish.
Rose.
This man be in business with you. I was acting in mode.
I've only contemplated.
We're just wrapping up. Be right there.
And me, is that I know what it's like.
Parish Episode 5 begins with the family attempting to leave the area before things get out of control following the major accident in the previous episode, in which Rose really murdered 2 of Anton's soldiers. Horse will be ready to put things right since he is furious that his own brother and sister were somehow connected to the events that transpired. As the program is about to end, a significant fact regarding Gray's son's passing is made public. The tensions in episode 5 finally get up steam, making it one of the stronger episodes of the season overall. The appropriate type of triggers are there in this stressful episode, which gives the impression that most people's lives are in jeopardy. The arc of Anton, who seems to be a flimsy side villain created for kicks, is the one aspect that I feel is not quite appropriate. Holding his family close, Gray tries to allow the sinking sense of what had transpired settle in at the beginning of the episode. At this point, Rose really loses it and is prepared to tell the police that she killed 2 men in self-defense. But because she doesn't know Anton as well as he does, Gray is certain that they don't. After that, the family gathers their belongings to flee. Parish phones Colin in the meantime, and when he returns, the two of them bundle the bodies in body bags, which they then load onto Colin's truck. Presumably, he will return the bodies to the location where the last ones were placed in an earlier episode. This time feels like the last farewell as the two buddies say their goodbyes. Parish urges Colin to make a fresh start in Cuba. However, one of Horse's men arrives and throws a bundle at Gray before the family can go. After that, Gray erects a temporary system to remove any traces of him from his home and visits it, gathering memories of his time there. After that, the family departs. However, Horse Tongai, who has just arrived at Anton's gathering and is shown to be more than simply a criminal who runs casinos, he is also a member of the government, tries to scare him. But when he attempted to seize control of his flawlessly constructed system, Anton makes him aware of the boundaries he had broken. Then he forces Horse to answer his father's call, in which his father expressly requests that he refrain from taking any action against Anton and assigns Zenzo command of their activities. We discover via Shamasho's conversation with Zenzo that Gray was the one who gave Horse's life to Anton upon receiving orders from their father, following the events of the previous episode which pointed to Gray being the one who set up the ambush. Because Shamasho has always been devoted to her father, we also find out that she was involved in the whole event. At the function, Anton presents Laura, a recent council election and immigrant from Nigeria. At her address, she promises safe travels and a place at the nation's center to those who come seeking the American dream with the right paperwork. Horse wants to do the exact opposite, so he is shocked to learn that Anton might be open to doing something similar.
You, Pacha. Cool.
Huh? Kuku chengeteza.
Careful. Metairie Nebo is probably looking
To Amjad, and we start.
together.
How can we trust you?
Come on.
I didn't grow up the way at 16. I always wanted to be good vans, driving them to.
Additionally, we see a glimpse of a large group of immigrants being welcomed by Shamasho and Zenzo as they arrive at Kumba, the home of the Zimbabwean criminals. Subsequently, we witness them dining with the populace, assuring them of their commitment to their employment prospects. Later, Shamasho and Zenzo phone each person individually, and under the pretense of offering them jobs, they hold their passports while feigning to protect them. Shamasho seeks to appease the immigrant who is able to blame them for their actions and put them in debt, preventing them from leaving. Afterwards, the Tongai take the woman to Kumba's dwelling, which is not the paradise they had been promised. When Gray and his family get at the Lafayette Hotel and he is caught on camera by the CCTV, his improvised arrangement back home is about to cause the house to catch fire. Gray says he's tied up all the loose ends, and this will help them get back on track since they will receive the insurance money from the fire. Mac and Rosie beg Gray to tell them everything about his background since they still don't feel like they can trust him. Gray talks about his beginnings as a vehicle thief, how he assembled his gang, and how he started taking on dubious missions for clients. Up until he met Rose in Chicago and made the decision to start a family, he claimed to have liked it. Consequently, I had believed that the pistol Rose discovered in her home belonged to Gray. However, now that they are all telling the truth, Rose admits that she used the rifle to murder one of Anton's men and that she had previously discovered it in Maddie's, Gray's deceased son bed. Mac lashes out at her parents for not knowing what Maddie was up to when he passed away at this point. She claims that her parents were not there to support her and that they were unaware of him as well. She exits the hotel room, disappointed, and Rose goes with her. The lady we saw was invited to go up to a more opulent room since she was unhappy with the Tongai's arrangement, but she was simply there to service the high-end customer who would be sleeping with them. This indicates that the company is not as simple and morally pure as Horse Tongai made it appear. Subsequently, Horse runs into Zenzo and Shamisho and expresses his displeasure with the way things have worked out and how their father has put a wall between them. When Gray examines the package that the man from Tongai gave him, he finds a recording recorder inside. Gray hears a scared-sounding man's voice when he plays it. It so happens to be claiming that he shot the person after witnessing them break into his truck. According to the confession, Gray's son was slain by the guy. On Parish Episode 5's epilogue, a furious Gray drives down to see Horse Tongai and demands to know who the individual on the tape was. Horse needs one final favor from him before he tells him who killed Maddie. Although the tape seems to sound a lot like Colin's voice, I'm not positive at this stage. If we were to speculate on what Horse would like to see happen right now, it would be for Gray to take Zenzo, Shamisho, or Anton out of the picture and allow him to once again calmly handle his business. As the event nears its conclusion, things are beginning to take shape.
I made a promise. No more secrets.
The American dream without fear.
Hey! Built my son.
It is.
But it's time we found a new crew. Dude, nobody's gonna sponsor you. I'll catch you later, boys.
Hey!
What's his name?
I could tell you that I would kill you. Brought it to me. His lawyer's safe.
Tell me, and you better tell me now.
I just need you to help me find
Gracie.
The Season 1 finale of Parish, Episode 6, is named A Good Man, and contains a number of plotlines coming together. Gray has finally found the guy who murdered his son, but will his vengeance offer him comfort? The Tongais were sliding at the end of Episodes 4 and 5, but it appears like they are back on track. The season hadn't been that enjoyable, and since Episode 5, the show had been rather typical. The preparation for the second installment haven't been announced yet. However, seeing Giancarlo Esposito, an angry and lost man with no links to his family, would be intriguing. After the last episode's conclusion, we know Horse would make a bargain with Gray to fuel his wrath. Gray is upset that Horse has had the recording for so long but has never shared it with him. Horse claims he only recently obtained it after Gray finished the work for him. Along with the passports, the bag, which accidentally belonged to Anton, included this tape, maybe to bait Gray for it. Gray is enraged and wants to know who the man in the recording is, but Horse will undoubtedly demand something in exchange. While the introductory interaction does not reveal what Horse wants, we may assume it has something to do with Anton. Gray also pays a quick visit to Sister Anne's church, despite her caution not to. He informs her that he has finally come close to obtaining justice for his son's death, and that he intends to accomplish so, regardless of how God or others perceive it. He then goes to Colin and has him listen to the recording. Despite Colin's advice to go to the police with the proof rather than doing it himself, Gray is resolute and begs him to make the call for him. Colin must have made the call after all. Gray is next seen at an antique shop, speaking with a man named Hector. Hector appears to be an old acquaintance, since he is not delighted to see Gray. He warns him not to go back into old habits because he will be obliged to summon the people above him. When Gray assures him that he is not afraid of Anton, and is simply there to learn about the man who murdered his kid, Hector responds that he is not talking about Anton, but about the man in Chicago. Who is the individual in Chicago? Well, the season does not address this, leaving things open for a hypothetical second season. I'm guessing that the person in charge of all of these murky activities, some of which involve political leaning, will be the boss. We saw Laura, the candidate for Attorney General who we met in the last episode. Anton was there for her briefing, and for a brief moment, we wondered why Anton would be interested in someone running on issues such as immigration assistance. Episode 6 of Parish, among other things, reveals that all of these individuals, including immigrants, lack conscience. the Tongais and Laura are just battling and living in order to maintain their dominance in America. Thus, we see Anton approaching Laura, and while she appears to be a self-assured individual eager to do good, we can tell that she is indebted to Anton. The money for her candidacy comes straight from him and the several businesses he owns, exposing the system's duplicity once more. He simply wants her to be elected, creating greater demand for his services. Nyasha Mambo, the immigrant girl who was forced to accept a client for sexual favors in the last episode, seemed to be troubled by the abuse she received from her own people. She did not come to America to live in the circumstances provided by the Tongans, nor did she want to make a livelihood from her body. So, while Zonzo's men are gathering up the workers for the day, she makes sure she finds a way out and runs away with the guys, who are looking for her everywhere. Later, we witness Shamisho having a disagreement with Zenzo about how they should govern things now that Horse is loose. She says she will do her share of the labor and then joins Anton, who is in the lonely junkyard where we originally saw him. She delivers them all of the passports they had obtained during Gray's robbery of Anton. The motive for doing this is unclear, but I'm guessing Barber, the Tongai brothers' father, had a pre-existing deal with Anton that Horse attempted to disrupt. The presentation also indicates that Shamisho was only pretending to assist Zenzo while secretly preparing something else with Horse all along. We have a sensation that something significant is in the works, and it will all happen on the same night. Anyway, I assume Hector gave Gray what he wanted since the following scene shows him tailing a guy called Travis. Travis is seen outside his residence saying farewell to a small girl. It's evident that Travis is related to Laura, as we'll discover later in the show. But Gray is interested in none of that, at least not right away, as we see him following Travis to an RR meeting. Gray slips inside, packing a gun, and sits down for the meeting. He spills his story, and Travis gets a little emotional and goes out for a smoke. Gray puts his gun against him and asks him to get into his car. He then takes him to his office place and questions him for doing what he did to his son. Travis tells Gray that he was in a really bad phase in his life. But Gray isn't interested in any of that, at least not immediately away, as we watch him accompany Travis to an RR meeting. Gray enters, packs a rifle, and settles down for the meeting. He tells his story, and Travis becomes upset and goes outside for a smoke. Gray points his rifle at him and tells him to get inside his car. He then takes him to his office and confronts him about what he'd done to his son. Travis admits to Gray that he was going through a very difficult period in his life. Because he had ingested some medications on top of drinking to his heart's content, he became confused when he saw the child clawing with his car and, in a rush, opted to discharge his revolver. He also left him there and did not notify the police because he had phoned his ex-wife Laura, note the link I mentioned, who had contacted Anton for assistance. So, ultimately, Anton was responsible for the cover-up surrounding his son's murder, denying Gray and his family the critical justice and closure they need. Travis informs him that Anton drove his truck and wrecked it so as to eliminate any evidence of him. Gray becomes increasingly enraged after discovering this, but he abandons Travis. Gray, driven by vengeance after being misled for so long, wipes all traces of his identity from one of his vehicles and traces Anton straight to the junkyard. He is now swapping the bag of documents Shamisho provided him with a few others. So he awaits calmly for them to depart, and as Anton is ready to start his car and drive away, he drives directly into him at high speed. He then changes back into gear and ramps into his car once again. Anton is taken aback by the attack and asks Gray to leave him alone, stating that there is more to his son's death than what he learned from the Tongais, but Gray refuses, allowing his car to explode, thereby murdering him. During the discussion, Shamisho offered Vernon a proposal to manage his staff using the personnel they had acquired. Vernon, the owner of a casino, need well-documented laborers with visas. However, he is uninterested in Shamisho's offer, presumably because he has an agreement with Anton. But when Horse, who was thought to be dead, turns up and Anton does not, Vernon is trapped and compelled to make a deal with the Tongais, especially since they have a hidden film of him having sexual relations with Nyasha. Once Gray finishes with Anton, I'm thinking one of the additional things he told Gray to do was kill Zenzo, as Horse and Shamisho express their willingness to continue business without him. Gray, who has had enough of everyone else's tactics, seals the siblings together in their own office and leaves them with a gun to conduct their own dirty job. Now, the Season 1 conclusion of Parish, Episode 6, leaves numerous loose ends, setting for a second season. Since the conclusion of Parish Season 1 finale, Shamisho is alone welcoming her father to America, and one of the other Tongai siblings, Zenzo or Horse, has died as a result of the shooting. Because both Shamisho and Horse wanted Zenzo dead, I assume they collaborated and killed him. Their father, allowing this cameo to be a pleasant surprise, is adamant about knowing the individual who ruined their family. We watch Nyasha, who previously was on the run, arrive at a nearby police station. This indicates that things will not be as simple for the Tongais as they have been in the past, unless they investigate their interaction with the government directly. After his conversation with Gray, Travis chooses to turn himself into the cops for killing Gray's son. Gray also calls Laura on Anton's mobile device, informing her that he is cognizant of what she has done.